That's fine. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. We are about to begin our next session titled Creating Resilience Through Climate Change Education. I would like to invite Ambreena Ahmed, Director of Teachers Resource Center, to introduce the session and to invite the chief guest, Senator Sherry Rehman, to deliver a keynote speech. Over to you, Ambreena.
Thank you so much. Madam Senator Sherry Rehman, chair of today's session, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, respected members from the education fraternity, fellow lovers of art, literature, and intellectual discourse, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. My name is Ambreena Ahmed, and I'm the Director of Teachers Resource Center, and I'd like to welcome you all to this session we are calling Creating Resilience Through Climate Change Education. The right words can really move people to think and act, and KLF does just that. We are so wholeheartedly grateful to this amazing platform and its organizers for bringing us this annual grand celebration and convergence of ideas, intellectual curiosity, and creative expression. This amazing platform draws together citizens, artists, poets, authors, economical, social, ecological, political experts, musicians, and performers to enrich our lives with their unique perspectives. In the midst of our bustling city's diverse tapestry, we find sources of inspiration and thriving dialogue through understanding and learning more about themes which are most critical in today's times. In today's times of hope and despair, hope and despair, and hope and despair. But hope must prevail. For hope is not a plan, but a pulse that beats within us and remains a guiding light. Today, as Pakistanis, we stand at a crossroads of a climate crisis which has threatened the very fabric of our being as a nation. Despite contributing less than 1% to the global emissions, Pakistan is one of the 5th most impacted countries due to climate change. The devastating floods of 2022 are a testament to the economic losses of over $30 billion which we bore and the fragility of us as a nation. The country faces dual intertwined emergencies of climate as well as learning poverty, with over 22.8 million children out of school and almost over 75% of them in school unable to read or comprehend a simple text which is age appropriate by age 10. Sustained, cohesive, and urgent measures are needed to move forward. Only through a unified commitment to education can we transform to thrive and survive. Being a largely youth-based country, there's a huge opportunity for us to engage, empower, and upskill our youth for resilience and co-creating sustainable solutions to Pakistan's education crisis. Today, we will participate in an empowering discourse which will unpack climate change education as a clear pathway forward. And we are very lucky to have with us one of the most influential voices on climate change education of our times. We need a homegrown model to tackle our own climate change issues and engage all stakeholders bottom up. I'm proud to inform that I come from an organization called the Teachers Resource Center, which has been working tirelessly and steadfastly for over 38 years to institutionalize urgent themes through teacher and student-centric models. And climate change education is the most recent one. Recently, we have launched a countrywide campaign where we are institutionalizing, developing materials, curricula, teacher training models, and student-centric campaigns to institutionalize climate change education through buy-in from all stakeholders. We are committed to cultivate environmental stewardship from as early as pre-primary to primary up to grade 10 at the school level and through the youth engaged in the public sector universities for designing social action projects addressing our indigenous issues through indigenous solutions. Please join me as I honor and welcome a true visionary, a passionate advocate, a dedicated policymaker, and an inspiring thought leader, and undoubtedly one of the most influential climate change champions of our time. Madam, it's a profound honor for me to read out from a long list of accolades and acclamations, but I would seize this opportunity and introduce our very own Senator Sherry Rehman, who's the parliamentary leader of PPP in Senate, chair of the Senate's Standing Committee on Climate Change and Environmental Coordination, President Pakistan National Group of the Parliamentarians for Global Action, former federal minister for climate change, ranked amongst 100 most influential people of 2022 by Time magazine, 25 most influential women by the Financial Times, former vice president of the United Nations Environment Assembly, founding chair of the Jinnah Institute, a fourth-term parliamentarian, diplomat, journalist, and a civil society activist, recipient of Pakistan's highest civil award, the Nishan-e-Pakistan. Madam, I invite you for a keynote address as the session chair. Thank you so much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Ambreena, for that long and generous introduction. I'm usually used to speaking from a podium, so forgive me if I struggle with this chair mic, but I will do my best. एक तो आप सबका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया यहाँ आने का भी और KLF का कि इन्होंने ऑर्गेनाइज़ किया सारे ऑर्गेनाइजर्स को बहुत बहुत मुबारक और I also hope that these literary festivals attract more voices, more people, and converge on key ideas that can change our realities. So I think the few things I want to say is, first of all, Ambreena very over-generously introduced me as an expert in climate education. So that's not really what I am, but I think it does not require maybe an expert on the environment and climate, a self-made one, but it does not require any rocket science to make the links between the future and today. And that link, that bridge in the chain is obviously, very obviously, young people, what they think, and how they act. So in many of our conferences, we've been talking about climate action, climate action, climate action. We now actually have fairly decent policies in place. Pehle to wo bhi nahi tha, we didn't have those. And the first job of a federal ministry in the face of very high devolution and excellent policies in each province, the only job really of a federal ministry on climate change and environmental coordination is coordination. And I had to come and change the name because environment was not part of the name. And it's part of our institutional confusion about what climate change is, what the environment is, and what this triple planetary crisis means for us. So we often get lost in jargon and use that as a substitute for action. And that's part of the whole bandwagon of climate change internationally, everywhere, that it can, conferences upon conferences internationally, create targets, set goals, and we are at a place where, well, 29 conference of parties, the international ones that address climate change, the COPs, 27, 28, 29. After that, instead of lowering the global goal of warming and emissions, we are actually going like this instead of even the plateau. So there's a science to it, and therefore the grapple here and the scatter is very great. It has to be understood and repeated again and again. And incidentally, the facts change very fast on the ground. Yesterday's or last week's talking points, if you're really keeping up with it, have usually lapsed into old news, meaning either the temperature has taken a new turn, or there are disasters of new making in many parts of the world, or we come up with new solutions. Those are really happening in the innovation spaces. Now, innovation, AI, this is the wave of the future, and that's entirely linked to the huge demographic of young people we have. Under 30, we have 60% of Pakistan still. And by mid-century, when we're 100 years old as a country, we will still have median age, what is known as a demographic youth bulge. That's a long time for a country to have young people still leading the demographic, the frontline demographic. So while all that is happening, my job here is very, very simple. Um, I think that I've always thought that climate change and environment and pollution, which are all separate things and they all mean separate actions, need to be understood, and at the heart of learning and pedagogy, I think that is a school. It's the home as well as the school. I mean, I learned my Urdu at home because when I was a kid, they weren't teaching Urdu in my school. So I said, listen, I want to be equipped. Um, Parents have a huge part to play in making this happen. They have a huge part to play in pressing their schools for introducing curriculums that are locally responsive to change that is happening and unfolding in front of us. There is nothing worse than an uninformed mob of people trying to, perhaps with some good intentionality, making change that really is irrelevant. Now, we are living in a very divided world where tolerance is low for opposition or criticism or dissent, which is very sad. And that also invites absolute positions, and it engenders young people to find easy gratification, silver bullets, where there are none. So for climate change, structural, environmental issues, there is no magic bullet. These are slow changes that are happening over time, and what is scary is that they're now so accelerated, the stress on the planet is so accelerated that climate change is going much faster in the science of it than expected, which is why you have hot summers, unbearable for work outside, and for which is why you have warmer winters and sometimes even colder winters. So what climate change does, number one, is it precipitates and amplifies extreme weather. So whatever the season is swinging towards that, we in Pakistan, particularly Karachi as a coastal city, are extremely vulnerable. We are vulnerable not because we've scientifically calculated it. We are vulnerable because we should have learned, we've seen it in 2022. One third of Pakistan was inundated in one flood, in one monsoon, totally wiped. Now that is a huge number, and that is 33 million people were impacted. Several died, and the thing about climate change is it creates a new layer of inequality, which is not really discussed much, because that's just not the international vibe. Why I say that is rooted to climate justice internationally, which I've had my foot in the door on, and also locally. So when you speak about climate justice, it has to filter down to those at the bottom of the social pyramid in your cities and your rural areas. So both are impacted very differently, but cities as coastal areas are bridgeheads. They are also impacted very strongly by rising sea levels, which is happening from the Arctic as it is melting. The ice is melting. It's melting much faster than expected. Also, Pakistan is completely, our water source is the Great Indus River and its various tributaries and its irrigation system. We should all know, like our children, that we use one of the largest man-made irrigation system in the world. And it needs sustenance, it needs conservation, it needs to be kept pollution-free. Your river, that is your lifeline, providing 90% of Pakistan's fresh water, is the second most polluted river in the world. And the culprit is effluent, untreated sewerage, and mostly plastic, single-use plastic, what I call the forever chemical, which does not go out of the water bodies and the landfills for at least 1,000 years. It does not biodegrade, which means our fish are eating it, our soil, our plants are, we think we are growing organic vegetables. We are starting to do that in patches in our homes. Those of us who are lucky to have a rooftop or a little patch of garden. You see, all of us are not landholders. So we, especially urbanites, so we're trying to do it because you don't even know what's going into the organic vegetables you're buying at a farmer's market. So you have microplastics going into your system, which is why you have such high rates of toxins rising in our bloodstreams, in our hormonal balances. I mean, it's an old wives' tale. Now this is how children can be engaged. Why is your generation so differently immune than ours? I mean, I'm 64, so that's still an immune generation. But my daughters, my children's is not. Their immunity is much lower to parasites, toxins, bacteria, pathogens, viruses, every illness you can think of. And those are transmitted. It's really about the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we consume. That is what goes into your body, and this is what children also need to understand and interact with and become the champions of change for. So this brings me this kind of organic relationship with nature is what our children need to be rebuilding. Because what did the 20th century do, ladies and gentlemen? It distanced us from nature. Man mostly, not women, of the global north, the industrial north, were busy conquering this planet, right? That's been the history of how humanity has evolved. And the conquest included, inventing plastics, cheap and affordable, transportable things to use. Obviously, factories, steel, cement, all of that makes our civilization what it is. I'm not sneezing at it. I'm saying that is the way it went. Humanity goes in a linearity, but I think it's time now to be circular. The 20th century was linear. The 21st century has to be circular, which means giving back to the soil, to the water, to everything that you're consuming. Because the other lesson that children need to learn, and so do adults, please, is that water is not infinite. Water, if you ask me what is the one crisis facing Pakistan, climate and environmental, if there's one, I hate that type of, reduction, but it's water and food insecurity that will hit us. Now, all of you able to come to beach luxury are not going to feel it. You're still in the 1%. It will be felt at the bottom of the social pyramid. It is already being felt. In the rural areas, it's a daily reality, and in wherever there is water scarcity. Because water impacts food, it impacts livelihoods, and it impacts the quality of your health, like air. And let's take, I say air, water, food, because these are things we can be responsible for. The big issue, it's not discussed internationally on climate, the horizon should be who is responsible, taking responsibility for resilience. I mean, we have to stop talking about just, how to mobilize, that's all fine, finance, this, that, it's very crucial. But at this level, when we're talking about children, when we're talking about our homes, our schools, and really the children are powerhouses for the future. So what do we do if we are not able to ingrain in them the value and the resource and the intrinsic nature of fragility that nature is facing today, the planet is facing today, our green areas are facing today, that our water and air is facing today, then half the job is done. The second part of the job is that they need to, if we fail to do that, then we're ignoring climate change education. And I do want to come to this subject. So what do countries, there are countries that have, Italy was the first country that adopted climate as part of the curriculum. And when I say climate, please forgive me, I mean it as a shorthand for the biodiversity crisis, the air quality crisis, and of course, climate change and environment. But they're all different things. Pakistan is a poster child for the poly crisis that is coming to us in all ways. It's like a perfect storm, yet we have very resilient soil, resilient water, and people. What do we do with children? There are 26 million children out of school. All your talking points are out of date. It's not 22 million, it's 26 million. Check that. And that's a huge number. Somebody asked me the other day, what keeps you awake at night? Believe it or not, it is that. Not every night, but if that really, really worries you, it should be that. And that is why I think the Teachers Resource Center, I often think of the TRC, you don't know that I do, is I wish we could empower the TRC to magically give us more teachers, because that's part of the crisis of education in the country. It's not so much schools, it's not, transportation. It is. It's the will of parents to send the girl child to schools, but it is having the teachers who have not ticked their box and gone home, or stood there and just told children that rote learning is what they need to do. Ye yaad kar lein, wo yaad kar lein. No. The heart of a good education is an inspiring teacher and someone who knows and who's also constantly learning. I mean, that's wisdom. That is, if you're even the slightest bit of an intellectual, then you are learning all the time. That's the whole point of life, as long as your cognitive machinery is working. So how do you involve children in seeing environmental protection as a daily habit? This has to become a habit. Inconvenient questions is one thing they've got to learn to ask, and that's what a good teacher does. Yeah. But right now, in Pakistan, a UNICEF survey tells me that I think only 26% of children in schools, I don't know about out-of-school children, in schools, this survey tells me, are aware of climate and environmental stresses. 72% don't know what it is. Now that is scary because it is their future. Ours is almost well gone, but it is their future that is hostage to this ignorance. So what can we do to change that? First of all, I think parents and public policy has a huge responsibility. You can't just, I really appreciate TRC doing this. I welcomed it and grabbed it with open hands. Ambreena keeps thanking me. There's nothing to thank. This is something that we owe our children and our future and our population. And with that, we can create the kind of upskilling that is possible to transition from a doom-based future to something that will take us into the 21st century as a middle power that is navigating a very difficult multilateral environment where conflict is back in the world. Incidentally, no one's talking about the cost of, the carbon cost of conflict and wars that have come back to the 21st century. Everybody thought, or they were taught, at least in our schools we were taught when we were growing up, that after the Second World War, there was a rules-based order set up. It certainly was. At the United Nations, from League of Nations, it went to the United Nations. And today, I said it the other day, the rules-based order internationally is an ICU. There are different rules for different players. Please understand that. And I keep telling policymakers in Islamabad, I want to share it with all of you because you're all influencers. Every single one of you, the 1%, is an influencer. You cannot say, but I have no agency, I sit at home. Or I have a small company, or I'm retired. All of you have agency. You have vehicles, you have an education, and you are here at the KLF with disposable time and income. Okay? So you all have agency, and you all can do something about it. Don't look up and curse each other, the world. Forget that. Don't waste your time. But understand that no one else is coming to do this. कोई गोरा ये करने नहीं आ रहा आपके लिए. Please. ये आपको खुद करना होगा. ना आपको तवक्को रखनी चाहिए, ना आपको ये फजीलत कोई दे रहा है. वो दुनिया बदल गई, वो शायद कभी वापस आए, हमारे बच्चे शायद उसे वापस लाएं अपनी फहम के साथ, लेकिन वो दुनिया बदल गई है. So please stop expecting, even in a meeting, that the UN will tell you what to do. They might even tell you what to do. The UN is still a benign actor, but it's being defunded, okay? And they've helped make policies in every province. Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Gilgit is one of the best actors. Gilgit-Baltistan, incidentally, their children are being educated in climate action because unke glaciers, unke samne melt ho rahe, and they often have very, very hazardous events when the frozen lakes burst because of overheating. Now, so very quickly, I think our children need to know that global heating and global warming is not something we have created. Our manufacturing base isn't enough to create those kind of emissions. So that's why we are less than 1%. It's not in our hands. It is continuing to grow, unfortunately. So what must we do? We must demand, let's not colonize our minds, decolonize our children's minds, demand action internationally from others, but do it without violence or anger. Too much anger. A little bit of anger is okay. But violence must not enter your discourse or your actions. And if it does, you have to step back, rethink, and apologize. That's what children need to learn. But ask for your rights in a sustained advancement of this public conversation. At home, never let that change the fact that you still have to take responsibility for your own house. Now, if your house is on fire, even that podium is on fire at the back, we'll all rush to try to put out that fire. If we don't, well, bad on us. But we can't just stand around saying, unhone lagai ya kisi ne lagai. That will come later, the bargain with the insurance company or whoever, the arsonist who's done it. But you still got to put out the fire, right? No one's coming for you. So put the fire out. Who will put the fire out? It's late for us, but taking responsibility for the quality of your water, your food, and your air is entirely in your hands. Air pollution is very different from global warming, which is making us very hot today. I grew up in a very different Karachi. Hawa chalti thi, sab set tha. AC ki zarurat nahi hoti thi. But now you need that cooling. Each air conditioner is also creating warming. So there is a national cooling policy. People need to pay attention to it, start asking the right questions. Children are now going to be the agents of change, but don't burden them with this. We created the problem, and they've been burdened with just all the transformational solutions. So I welcome TRC's curriculum because what it needs to do is be interdisciplinary, meaning it should not be, I really think climate change and environment is taught internationally as part of, our children say they learned it, the 27% who know about it learned it either in geography class or science class, right? So I think that it should be taught almost in every class. It should be taught in international relations, it should be taught in civic, classes, and there needs to be, I mean, if there's a public policy class or governance class, that's the heart of climate action at home. So if our rivers are polluted, start asking the right questions. Why is our water so polluted? Nobody else has done that for us. Yes, there's dumping on our coastline. When we were in government, I made sure that was stopped. There's a policy now that ships can't dump. Whether you know it or not, they can't. They will need a great deal of clarity from the ships that are coming here too, because China has stopped the dumping. Pakistan has gone to Africa now. Did you know that? Our coastline in 2020 or 2019, 2021, there was a massive dumping. I think huge cargo ships came and dumped almost toxic hazard on our shores. This is an international habit. Because the world lies to us, they lie to each other. Only 9% of plastic is recycled in the world after all the hangama tamasha. 9%. Pakistan only recycles 1% of all its waste, despite Sher Shah. We don't know about what goes on in Sher Shah. We're a jugaad economy, so we reuse, which is excellent. Repair, reuse, recycle, and don't just throw away things, right? So that's our good news. But we need to take responsibility for what's the water that's coming in. Now here I was checking the last time I came and blasted everyone, okay, what's a plastic bottle doing here? So it's gone away. I do this everywhere. I was reading, I made sure I read. I don't want to hassle Nestle, but they always respond. Doesn't say anywhere this is recyclable. Check it out. Check what it says. And if it says it's recyclable, I asked at a several huge gathering, both internet, I said, show me the collection centers. Where is the recycling happen? It happens when you first dump it in a collection sector. I live in half the time in Islamabad. It's very small compared to Karachi. You can manage Karachi, Islamabad. So where is the collection center for F7? Where is the, where all the shops are? वहाँ होते थे पहले हमारी बचपन में return the bottle and you gave in large Pepsi, Coke, other bottles and returned the bottle and you got a refund, a small. So that's an incentive. None of that circularity exists anymore. This is all rubbish that it's being recycled. It is not. If it is, I'd really like a session next year on all the core producers telling us how. And I want to help them. I'm not their enemy. I keep telling them, I'm calling you out, but I'm not your enemy. We need to find you low-cost alternatives. Who will find the low-cost alternative? Our young people. And actually, they are doing it. They are innovation hubs all across Pakistan that people don't know about. Because these young people in universities, in even secondary schools, are creating solutions. The minute they find out of a water or air quality crisis, they're creating solutions. I'm not even going into the energy transition. That's too big to handle for children right now or us, but I mean, the good news there, ladies and gentlemen, is Pakistan is going renewable on its own. On its own. There's a solar revolution happening right under our noses, despite government. When I say despite, I do have to give us all a bit of credit. It's because of an enabling policy called net metering, where everybody who can afford solarization is selling energy back into the grid. The grid is now too overloaded with extra energy. But that's the fact, that's the reality. We are going through a rooftop revolution. We've imported 1/3 of our installed capacity in 1 year from China of solar panels. They're going somewhere. So Pakistan can meet its nationally determined commitments and promises aram se by 2060. This is all rubbish that it can't. It's just happening. And that's not the issue. We've never been big polluters. But there is an issue in Punjab. They have a 5th season there. And the pollution often rises here as well. It's a very big city. The effluent coming out into the river, the effluent coming into the air. That's what you all need to teach your children about. That this is what we need to worry about. And please teach them that water is the new gold. I won't call it the new oil. I don't particularly like oil. It's a dirty fuel, but it's the new gold. Please don't throw it away. Pakistan is set to be water scarce in 2025, so I'll still drink the water given to me. 2025 is right here. It's here today. So you know what's happened? We don't know that we are water scarce because no one's telling us. And one day a UN agency will stand up and tell you that your peripheral areas are water scarce, then we'll take cognizance of it. But parts of Balochistan, Buledi sahab, aap baithe hain, you know, are water scarce. Complete desertification. The cracked earth you see, that's the norm now. फिर भी हम लगे हुए हैं कि हम वहाँ पानी निकालेंगे ट्यूबवेल से और निकालेंगे because there's no water left underground also. It's called groundwater. It's not there anymore. The same is happening in many parts of Sindh, but Sindh and Punjab are irrigated, as I said, by the Indus and by the largest man-made irrigation system in the world, which is Punjab. The canal colonies, created by the British for different reasons, whatever it is, big hydropower source. So Our children need to understand, urban children need to understand, please don't let people spend the whole day with the hose. I mean, I'm the scourge of, I'm the nightmare of all drivers in Islamabad early morning when I go for a walk. In Karachi, I don't go for the early morning walks. I see people washing cars and drive. अच्छा पानी चल रहा है रोड पे किस लिए बंद करो लाला क्यों बीबी क्यों आप पीछे पड़ी I said ये खत्म हो रहा है. This is all our future. This is our right. It's also an entitlement. I'm against too much pricing of water because it creates, inequalities. But the point is, Pakistan is already water scarce. In Thatta, in Badin, in Jacobabad, in, Turbat. And you know what else is happening there at the same time? These are the hottest places in the earth, on the planet, every year in the summer. 53 degrees for last 3 years. No one's listening. I keep saying it. It's 53 degrees. It is not fit for human work or habitation. You can fry an egg on the pavement at 53 degrees. Just for perspectives, the UK or parts of Europe declare an emergency when it's 40 degrees in the summer. Matam hota hai wahan. Hum par for the cost le rahe. Now, we're not causing this overheating. This is, again, an international problem because emissions are continuing like this. Big coal, big gas, big everything is carrying on, oil. And they're producing, and they're emitting. And so every year we're hearing, okay, this was the hottest January, this was the hottest December, this. And at the conference of parties, everybody wrings their hands and say, oh, ho, but we are going this way. Next year, maybe, we'll look for transformative solutions. What transformative solutions? 30 conferences later, the bargain between the global and North and South is broken, if this is where we're going. And it needs to be repaired, not by piecemeal, little bit of green financing for Recharge Pakistan, little bit, because that's what they are. Pakistan has gotten a fraction of climate financing. So has India, make no mistake. So has Bangladesh. Bangladesh has done the best because they're looking after things themselves. So that's what we need to teach our children, that this soil is not infinite. It will not give again and again and again. If you kick anything, it won't. The water is not infinite. So recycle it, conserve it. Why? Because we are one of the 4th or 5th largest consumers of water per capita in the world. Now, per capita tells you, I check all this, I explored it. What can we take responsibility for? Per capita tells you what you're doing with your water. I mean, you don't want to become like Cape Town one day, where they had to ration the timing of the shower. यहाँ तो ration भी नहीं हो सके. किसी को क्या पता आप कितनी देर अपना shower चला रहे हैं, या कितनी दफ़ा flush pull कर रहे हैं, या पीने का एक canister मिल रहा है एक household को, because that's already happening. In 60% of urban settlements in Pakistan, that's already happening. There isn't enough water. People are squabbling over water everywhere. And the crisis is always greatest in urban centers. Rural Quito, we don't hear about it. That's already desertified, but you drive through Pakistan, I often do, I did just Punjab and Sindh. I mean, this is God's grace that it was green. I mean, Punjab was green. Again, resilient. It is God's grace that we recovered many parts of Sindh, but God wants you to help yourself. So the resilient households being built, do you all know about it? There are 2.1 households being built. West Sindh, the areas that were affected because people lost their shelter and it's not coming back. You can't live in tents and have a future, right? You can't get an education. There's no schooling there, there's no internet there. So the resilient housing is the first step. And in that resilient housing, the good thing is, like the Benazir Income Support Program, the first time ownership is going, there were farmers living on unowned land. So that ownership of that land, title is going to the household, but it's going to the woman of the household. It has to be the woman of the household. I don't know if you people know about it, but it's a big revolution and it's being assisted by the World Bank. There the women, and I'm telling you, that women will plow back into that soil. They will conserve the water. Why I'm telling you this, and our children need to know this about inequality, gender inequality as well, that women in Pakistan, not any of you, spend 72% of their time carrying water in cities, in rural areas, all over Pakistan. 72% of their day. Okay? That's a huge percentage. And the water carriers of this country are, when there's no piping, are women. So they're doing that, and we have to ask ourselves, anyone who's carrying water for a mile or half a mile or even 10 minutes is going to conserve that water, surely. Anyone who has to pay for the soil and worry about, will this grow? Oh, should I plant rice again? It's taking up too much water. It's a thirsty crop, right? The children will ask and the women will ask, do we have enough water? Should we try a crop rotation? Oh, there's an NGO down the road selling us a way to grow paddy or rice without less water. Shall we use that? You know, the younger people are doing that. I've been to farms in Sindh and Punjab, you'll be shocked. Some of the big farms run by the younger people on drip irrigation, 60% on drip irrigation now, sending oranges abroad. The others are on, the mango ones in Sindh are doing something else. So wherever the young people are in charge, the under 40s, the 30s, they're changing the way farming works. And that's crucial. But that's not always easy for the poorest of the poor. But once they own the land, then our job as citizens is to provide, if we can, the linkages. I mean, my ambition is to set up an innovation fund for young people where they come up with the green solutions, because believe it or not, in NUST and all these universities, you must know Ambreena, they're coming up with fantastic low-cost solutions, rainwater harvesting. I even took one from one of the girls doing something, rainwater harvesting for the home. But they don't have the capital or the intellectual mentoring that is needed to scale it up and make it, maybe get a patent or get a big company to adopt them. So Karachi can be a haven for that, and as soon as I retire, that's what I'm doing. So I mean, we need to all pitch together and do this, because young people are where the journey to transformative action is. It's not with you and me. We can still tell the story, but we have to assist them. We have to, because we created this crisis. By being unaware, by being 20th century consumers, which is great. Consumption is all good. I mean, I wouldn't even, I don't want to say more, but I would do a lot of things differently. So habits don't all have to change. We don't have to panic. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but the process can begin. I force my husband to always say, okay, tell me how much water you need to just shave. So he has to hear this every week, shouting, okay, let's see how much water you're using. I'm measuring the carbon footprint of our home, which is why I've solarized in Islamabad, because the carbon footprint was too high. The heating there is needed much more than here, and even the cooling, believe it or not. So extreme weathers, the capital outlay, whatever you can afford, you need to do. And for the rural people, we need to, I mean, this is the one last ask I would have of our children, of our teachers. Ask them, when a country needs transformative action, then we need to have children doing more than plant one tree. They need to do more than plant one tree and look after that tree. They need to do that. But they need to take actions in their community. This should be part of their qualifying exam. If you want your degree, show us how you have saved water. It's not very difficult. Calculate your carbon footprint. They learn like this. They're not dinosaurs like us. On their phones, they've learned. And give us back what you've done for the year. On that, you will qualify. What community service have you done? We were brought up to do community service. Sorry, today's elites are not. They are not. The money is immediately spent somewhere else. So it has to be reinvested. It's like Mother Nature or like a parent. If you abuse them, they can't look after you, right? It's like anything. It's a law of nature. So you have to teach children to nurture. Hostility is the opposite of good climate action. You have to teach them to nurture the earth, to nurture each other, and to replenish our natural resource. But if you see a brick kiln, I see it on the way, I still do it. I'm seeing on the motorway to Lahore, I'm seeing a brick kiln. They're not supposed to emit that black smoke, which is what's one of the big reasons that pollution is so bad there. Here we get the sea breeze blowing it out, so we get lucky. It's again nature rescuing us, not us. But I take the picture, I post it, I send it to the Environment Protection Agency because I know them. But we need to do this. We need to lessen this gap between ourselves. Democracy only works if you demand it. It doesn't work as a passive entitlement in countries like that are halfway there. So demand your action. Say, I want to see why this brick kiln is not closed, or why this factory is putting out black fumes, or why it's throwing sewage. They make enough profit into the water because that's what they're doing. I won't tell you the figures for Karachi. They will really, really shock you. But I'll give you a small figure for Rawalpindi and Islamabad. 9 billion gallons of untreated sewage are going, 9 billion gallons a day, going into the Rawal Dam. You've seen the Rawal Dam? Used to be beautiful. It can be beautiful again. But it's going to be our children who will change that. Thank you. Time's up.
Thank you so very much, Senator Shari Rehman, for this powerful keynote, which has ignited both a sense of urgency and hope amongst all of us. A big thank you to KLF for making this happen, and very, very grateful to you, our dear audience, for listening to us, for your interest and ownership of this cause. I'd like to end with reading out two quotations, which I found very relevant for today's session. One which says, "Climate change is no longer some far-off problem. It is happening here. It is happening now." And lastly, in the end, we will conserve only what we love, and we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. Thank you so very much, and thank you so much.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Shari Rehman. May I ask the audience to please stay? The next session begins almost immediately, and we will have Senator Shari Rehman in conversation with Victoria Schofield. This is another very interesting conversation because I'd like to read you a little bit about the next session. Shari Rehman, the first female leader of the opposition in the Senate in 2018, has served as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States from 2011 to 2013 and is currently serving as the Federal Minister for Ministry of Climate Change. Will now be in conversation with Victoria Schofield, journalist, author, and historian, who first came to Pakistan in 1978 to cover the proceedings in the Supreme Court of Pakistan during the trial of the former Prime Minister Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Together, the two ladies will discuss how and when their paths first crossed, as Shari turned from journalist to politician, and Victoria embarked on a career as a South Asian commentator, returning frequently to Pakistan. Their shared friendship with the former Prime Minister, Shahid Benazir Bhutto, providing the basis for their own friendship. Together, they will discuss their decades of activism and their hopes and fears for Pakistan and the region.
Has she arrived? Check. Low, 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 check. Too loud.